It's not going to happen anywhere else in the world. And I think that's what makes GAY so special, is that, you know, that certain things will happen that won't happen anywhere else.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. When most people think of GAY, the iconic club night that has hosted performances from such superstars as Kylie Minogue, the Spice Girls, Madonna, and my personal favorite, Daphne and Celeste, they think of the Astoria, the central London music venue that hosted the night from when it started in the early 90s right up until the late 2000s. The Astoria, unfortunately, was the victim of Crossrail, a railway construction project that started in 2009 and completely changed London's queer scene, resulting in the demolition of the Astoria, as well as other queer venues like Ghetto and First Out Cafe. I caught up with Jeremy Joseph, the owner of the GAY nightclub chain, to find out about the early days of the club, what it was like working alongside the mafia, who was responsible for the worst performance in the history of GAY, and why the Astoria has such a special place in his heart. So if we start at the very beginning.
What, like the Bible?
Yes.
Okay, so I can start that.
Can you tell me about Adam and Eve?
Yeah, well, God said, let there be light, and there was.
Uh-huh.
And then God said, let there be disco, and the light started flashing. And that's how it all started. But I do want to say very clearly that was before my time.
And you know, was the disco ball the first iteration of that plan, or did he start with cubes? Did he start with other objects?
I wasn't there, so I'm going to guess that the apple was the first disco ball.
Yeah, well, that would make sense. It's got the built-in
it was on the tree, it was spinning, the light hit it, and it created this kind of disco. And the snake and I think it was just the snake and Adam and Eve. They were the first people in there.
Just getting down.
Yeah.
Okay, but so GAY started in 1976, and that's you were not there.
In what year?
I got this on Wikipedia. 1976.
Absolutely not.
Well, okay, but it was like
earlier
iterations.
Did that come from?
Earlier iterations.
No, absolutely not. No.
All right, so Wikipedia, you were wrong.
GAY didn't. Wikipedia. Listen, first things first. Never listen to Wikipedia. I mean, it's like they put up what they like and said, no, absolutely not. I don't know where. 1976. I was at school then, so hardly. GAY didn't start till I've got to think what year Confide with Me was.
94,
that was 92.
Oh, no. Was it?
94. Then GAY would have started 93 or 92. Okay. I mean, because GAY, when it actually started, it started as the very first, it didn't start as a club night. It started as the very first LGBT radio program on Spectrum Radio. So it's the first LGBT London radio program. And I was at that time, I hosted that radio program. I was at that time working at the Royal Oak pub in Hammersmith as a DJ. I was one of those annoying talking DJs because in LGBT pubs in those days, we used to like put a record on, talk in between, and then bring on cabaret acts. So I would obviously introduce people like Lily Savage, Regina Fong, Adrella.
And so what would you say in between? Like, this song is...
Well, sometimes you may do a dedication, or you try and bitch and be funny. You try and like say something about somebody in the audience, or say something funny about the bar staff, or say something that you thought was funny but nobody else did, but it amused you. I don't know. It was a very different time because LGBT venues were very much more community orientated. We didn't have equality. And even though LGBT venues now are supposed to be safe spaces, they were even safer spaces because, that was 90s and people were very much like, were not as out as people were now. And you would go out and you would, and sometimes that was the only time you would be out. And obviously during that time as well, for a lot of people, we were facing HIV and AIDS for the first time, and we were growing up with that, and our lives were very different, and we were fighting for so many different things then. So actually, venues were much more community orientated than they were, say, now, because there was a fight on our hands. We were fighting the government, we were fighting public opinion, we were fighting for our lives. And we were fighting for the rights of things like to be in the armed forces, for an equal age of consent. There were so many things we were fighting for, but you could feel a change in attitude, and that fight was becoming a fight to win. I, at that time, as I said, was working at the Royal Oak, and the big clubs at the time were the Fridge in Brixton, obviously Heaven, and Bang, which was run by Colin Peters. And unfortunately, we lost Colin Peters to an age-related illness, and his business partner and brother carried on running Bang. And I kind of got to know them and did some one-off events for them. And they were struggling with Bang. Numbers were dropping. And they had decided to open a bar in Streatham, and they'd asked whether I'd take on the venue in... which was then in the LA2, which was below the Astoria. It used to be like they used to have 3-4 nights a week, and it had dropped down to... No, they had 3 nights a week. They had their Mondays, their Thursdays, and their Saturday. They'd lost the Mondays and Thursday. I was brought in to revive the Saturdays. And then as it grew, I was asked to... the owners of the Astoria... and you have to remember, this was kind of when venues were run by gangsters. I mean, it was like, it was not an easy time, and they were not easy people to work for. So I was brought in to bring the Thursday night. And at that time, the Bang name, Debbie, who was the business partner, and Jamie, who was Colin's brother, they were receiving an amount of money for the use of the name. I was paid a fee. When we got the second night going, obviously there was a fallout between Bang, the people who own Bang, and the people who own the Astoria, because they were trying for more money, and it got, as always, got quite nasty. But I was just employed at the time, so I was the one in the middle. And when you work for gangsters, they don't really care, and they kind of just go, "Do you know what? If you don't like it, go." And that's how it is. And I was kind of given the ultimatum. It's like, you can go with Bang, or you can stay and keep this going. And at that point, that was my livelihood. That was how I was earning money. I could just walk away. And also there were people other DJs, bars, everyone else's jobs were on the line. So I took the risk and said, okay, I'll take it on. But obviously I didn't own the Bang name, so I had to change the name. By then, GAY was establishing itself as a radio station. I'd done some big interviews. I'd done an interview with Jason Donovan, which was at that time quite controversial, and front pages of lots of newspapers. So the GAY name got known for radio. I thought, well, why not actually create it into a club night as well? So from that point, we changed. That's how GAY was born.
So, obviously it's one thing working for the Bang promoters and running a night on their behalf, and it's a completely different thing to suddenly be the person that's responsible for everything. How did that feel, taking that responsibility on?
I don't think I really thought about it, because at the time it just kind of happened. I mean, nothing really changed in the sense of like I had run Bang to the way I wanted to do, and it was the format of GAY already. So I kind of changed it because at the time, where Bang had lost its personality was because the DJs had kind of changed the music policy. They kind of went a lot harder, and because the LGBT press were kind of being very much more favourable to the clubs like Trade and things like that. And so Bang had started playing heavier music, and it lost its identity, which was to be a party pop venue. So I kind of brought that back. There wasn't really a big change, to be honest. The pressure hadn't changed because the responsibility of whether you work for someone or you're running yourself didn't change, because at the time you were like, the responsibility was already on your shoulders of make or break.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And also I'd been working at the Royal Oak for about 5 years before. And, so I'd given up my job at the Royal Oak. I'd given up everything to, a job that I've had for 5 years. I was working, I was earning money, I was doing doing well out of it. It was paying the rent and everything. So I needed it to work because otherwise I'd be out of work. My job at the Royal Oak had gone to somebody else. I'd kind of given up DJing to do this. I had to make it work.
Well, nothing like that kind of pressure to get you going, is there?
But it wasn't. I think I don't think it was a pressure. I don't look at it like that as pressure, because I was making it work. The only pressure was like when you work for people like that and gangsters, you get ripped off all the time. I mean, people see a packed night and they think, "Oh my God, you must be earning millions," and actually you're not, because these people are ripping you off. But that's the problem when you get a job that you're reliant on that job, and people are reliant on that work. You do get ripped off as and there's nothing you can do because you can't walk away.
So are you able to talk about that anymore? I'm a bit like...
You can ask me questions and I'll work out what I'm to answer. I mean, the people who owned it aren't necessarily like unnecessary. I don't know. It's a very different time. I mean, it's like, what went on in 90s, early 2000s and what goes on now were two different times. Things would security controlled a lot of things. I mean, it was run by gangsters. It's just, that was a kind of like, even when I worked at the Royal Oak, the family who owned that they were East End gangland people. But actually, in a way, the good side of it kept LGBT people safe. Do you know what I mean? Because they were like that, you wouldn't get picked on, because they kept those venues
because you
safe.
wouldn't fuck with them.
These are kind of people you don't argue with. So
okay.
On a negative, but if you look at when people talk about the Cray twins and how the East End at one point was safer because you had gangland running it, and actually that was the same as clubbing. It's like you were kind of protected.
But so how did you navigate that world, knowing that just things could get really messy really quickly at any point? Well,
as I said, it didn't, because it was in a way that was the way the clubland was. But in a positive side of it, it was for the people who worked in it, the people who you got looked after. You knew that nothing would happen to you, kind of thing.
So it was just something you accepted as part of everyday life?
I wouldn't say everyday life, but you just accept these are the people that own the venue you're working. As I said, it probably sounds weird talking about it now, but it was a different time, and things changed. Suddenly the councils and the police and all that suddenly didn't allow these things to happen anymore. But at that time, they closed their eyes to certain things. There were always rumours flying around that the police and the council were paid off. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. But that they were the rumours flying around at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so I will be asking more questions about gangsters, but
okay.
let's talk about that first night then. So you in some ways it was just a continuation of the night you had already been running for Bang, but do you remember that first time when the billing was GAY?
No, because it really literally didn't. It didn't feel like a new, like I was doing the new. It literally, and people going to the venue had no idea. It was, it changed names and that was it. Nothing else really changed because I'd already been running it. So I kind of, the format hadn't changed. Nobody really noticed. Maybe the staff obviously did. Well, even they said they didn't because they were answering to me anyway. So they didn't nobody really noticed.
So it wasn't momentous in it wasn't a big relaunch or anything like that.
No, I mean, we also wanted to make it low. We wanted to make it low key. I mean, we didn't really want to make a big deal out of it because A, I was running it already. B, it was just a changed name. And also, I felt a little bit, I'm in between two kind of parties, the people who owned the brand, the people who owned the Astoria, and I was kind of caught in between the two. And obviously, whichever way I had gone on it, I was going to be the bad guy. So if I'd gone and closed down the club night and gone, that's it, I've got to go with on the bang side, then that would have been an LGBT venue. So that would have put me on a bad side and people had lost their jobs. If I had carried, but I chose to carry it on. So I kind of want, so obviously Bang had a good history. It been an amazing brand and night for many, many years. So I was going to come across the bad guy. I knew whatever way this went, I was going to win. So, and I was going to look like, oh my God, he's stolen that brand or he's done that. So the best thing for me to do is to try and make it as low key as possible and try and just carry on and then slowly build the new GAY brand.
But did you feel a difference in you?
No, I would literally, because I was running it already, so I was just carrying it on. The difference was politically, suddenly, for the first time ever, we would suddenly bring in LGBT gay into the forefront of central London. If you look at where Heaven is, you look at where it was all very hidden kind of. But suddenly we are opposite Centre Point in the centre of town. And here we are, the centre of London, suddenly going, this is a gay night. There was no hiding it anymore. That was the difference. And also we were suddenly bringing, obviously we were booking artists who were getting headlines. And suddenly the brand of GAY was becoming front page stories on newspapers. For the first time ever, an LGBT club brand was suddenly getting a positive image. Before, whenever a national newspaper wrote about an LGBT club night, it would be drugs, it would be seedy, it would be disgusting. But suddenly, we were bringing a positive image. So we were changing the attitude of. By branding it GAY, we were bringing a positive attitude towards, the gutter press.
Mm-hmm. And you are a very ambitious man, so you really built that brand. I guess the question I have is have you always been ambitious, or was it just that I've got this opportunity, I may as well exploit it?
I've always been ambitious, always, but this wasn't the career I chose. In my head, I was going to be a children's TV presenter. Well, I wanted to be a TV presenter, and then I saw the likes of Andy Peters and Philip Schofield doing it, and I was like, well, hang on, they look very camp. Maybe a camp gay man can do this. And so I think TV presenting was always my dream, and doing game shows and things like that were my first love. And getting into DJing and being a talking DJ had been a way. I always looked for avenues to achieve that career. But this was not my chosen career.
But so then at what point were you like, okay, I'm all in, I'm going to...
Well, I think you get yourself into a rut. I mean, like anything, you get yourself into a rut. And it's interesting that we're doing this interview now, we're in a pandemic. And a lot of people are being made unemployed. A lot of people are being made redundant. And a lot of people are unhappy at the moment. And this is probably a chance in a lifetime to actually make some changes or try to make some changes. So, and I think basically with me going back to that, you get yourself into a rut. You're earning money. I took on a mortgage. You suddenly get yourself into a situation where actually you can't make choices because actually you're stuck in something I was enjoying it, and I was, things were going very well, and you had no choice but to carry that on, because suddenly this is what you're doing. And there's a responsibility. There's a responsibility when you run an LGBT club night. There's a responsibility, more so now, actually, believe it or not, than back then. But at that time, there were like 4 regular major brands, and each of the big club nights, whether it be the Fridge or Trade or DTPM or Heaven or GAY, we all were trying to be different, but also competing each other. But GAY was, and obviously the pop stars as well, but GAY was slightly different from the others, because the others tried to be trendy. They tried to be like different. Pop stars at the time was huge because indie music was huge at the time. Trade was huge because obviously that clubbing, after our clubbing had suddenly become really big. So they were all innovators in their own way, whereas GAY tried not to be. It was about being commercial, about being pop. It wasn't about being trendy. So we were creating our own success in another way. But, there's a pressure that when you're doing that, because then you're becoming part of people's lives. Because, as I said earlier on, some people, this was the only time they were ever out. This was the only time they could go and be themselves. So you were creating, like each venue was kind of creating their own communities. So there was a pressure to make that work. It was more than just going to a bar or a club. It was about people's lives.
And so, well, actually, first of all, so are you trying to tell me that during the pandemic, you've rethought everything and you're going to go in a different direction?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, yeah, the pandemic has created, I don't know where I am at the moment. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but, if I could walk away today from this, I would.
Wow. That's a big thing to say.
But when we bought Heaven, which we bought Heaven 11 years ago, we didn't just buy a club, we bought 40 years of LGBT history. Well, at that point, it was 30 years. So I can't just walk away. And funny enough, I did have an offer to buy Heaven, but the person who offered to buy it, I don't trust them. I don't trust them to keep it LGBT. I don't think their love is LGBT, and they don't have enough LGBT experience. So, it's not a matter of going, oh, I can walk away. The pressure to keep LGBT venues open now is so hard, and we've lost so many venues over the years. So I think now when you own an LGBT venue, you don't necessarily walk away from it as easy as maybe if you owned a Wetherspoons pub.
So let's go back. So at what point did GAY move from that underground bar to the Astoria?
It's funny, actually, because what happened was I got conned into doing it. So LA2, which is underneath the Astoria, it was 1,000 capacity. The Astoria was 2,000 capacity. So you got to remember, like now, like when we open venues, if you go over capacity now, you'll be breaking the law. When you're run by those days when we were run by gangs, they went over capacity all the time. But they got into trouble quite a lot because things were changing, and the council were like saying, coming in and checking, and they could see that obviously like GAY was over capacity, but they kind of somehow got away with it. Anyway, I got called up for a meeting by the owners, and they had said, the council have said that they're going to close GAY down because it's over capacity, as if it was my fault. It wasn't, I had no control over how many people got into the venue. That was controlled by the venue. I would happily have stopped the numbers at like whatever, but I didn't have a control. They would be going, the owners would see a queue outside going, let more in. And I go, okay. Anyway, so they kind of lied to me, and they said, the Westminster Council have said, they're going to close GAY down. And they said, look, the only way we can save GAY is if you move to the Astoria. And I'm going, what the fuck? It's 2,000 people. Like, how am I going to do that? And it's like, what the hell is going on? Like, I thought, oh my God. And I like, but they kind of forced my hand. And then I thought, you know what? And then, you walk out of a meeting and you go, fuck, what if I fell and all that? And they kind of said, look, if it doesn't work, we can always move back down there. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe, again, this is an opportunity. So, and I suddenly realized that if we moved into the Astoria, we would be the biggest LGBT venue in the country, because it was a higher capacity than the Fridge. It was a higher capacity than Heaven. And I just thought, oh my God, I could be the biggest promoter in the country. What the fuck? Let's do it.
So you weren't just like, no, fuck, and just crawled up into a ball.
No, I did. I mean, it took me a few days. I mean, you think about it. And then what I did was I didn't tell anybody. So what I did was I put an advert in Boys, and I think there were so many, I think it was like MX at the time or whatever. And it was just a plain black and white advert and text. And it just said, and I said to them, if you tell her who put this ad in, I'm not paying for it. So you cannot tell anyone. And I put in this advert, said, coming soon, the biggest LGBT club night in the country, in London, in London, coming to London, something along the line to go, with a legal capacity. I put legal because we all broke the law. That includes Heaven and Fridge. Everyone else, but obviously the Fridge couldn't go. But we do 2,000 every Saturday night because they go, your capacity isn't 2,000. So, you'd be breaking the law. So they couldn't say it. So I did with a legal capacity of 2,000. I didn't name the venue or anything. And I remember the owners of the Fridge and the owners of Heaven ringing me going, do you know who this is? And I'm going, no, I've got no idea. Going, oh my God, I'm lying to everybody. And I let this advert run for 2 weeks. I created this buzz. And then we announced it was GAY moving. And I got Daphne Minogue to do the opening night. And I knew it was about 3-4 weeks before Pride. And I really wanted Kylie to do it. But at the time, Kylie and Danny had the same manager, and Kylie had already done GAY in LA2 twice. And I had asked if I move up to the Astoria and it's going to be this huge number, would Kylie do Pride for me? Because she'd done a Pride for me before. And Terry said, well, look, let's do Danny on the opening night and let's see how that goes first. Because if it's a disaster, I ain't letting you have Kylie. So we did Danny on the opening night. The queues went round the block. And the Astoria has the most amazing stage. I mean, just incredible. I mean, there wasn't a stage like it in London. We could do things on there that we couldn't do anywhere else. It was amazing. And I remember standing on the side stage with Terry. Danny did the show, which was amazing. It was just the atmosphere was electric. It was just like, wow. I mean, it was like, it was incredible. And it was like, this was beyond my dreams. These were people that I used to play their records, and then suddenly I'm working with them. And I remember standing at the side of the stage with Terry, watching Danny, watching the crowd reaction. And I looked at Terry and I said to him about Kylie for Pride. And he just looked at me and went, yeah. And I go, oh my God, I've got Kylie for Pride again. Oh my God. And I go, but you can't tell anyone yet. I go, why? You just said yeah. She said, because I haven't told Kylie yet. I went, oh, okay then. Because I wanted to go, they go, Kylie's in 3 weeks time. So, and it was just amazing. It was just like the beginning of an incredible journey, because to have Danny on the opening night, and you knew that you were going to be building this brand in the Astoria because you were suddenly getting bigger names. And then suddenly this was a credible venue for people to perform at, because they were going to get, perform on a stage that was huge. It was just and suddenly we were launching acts, and that it was a complete game changer.
Yeah. So let's talk about the pop act and musical acts that you had perform. You'd started doing it when you were in LA2. Do you remember who the first act was that you booked?
At the time, I remember, the first thing was I wanted to put artists on. I mean, the first time it was kind of like the divas that were going around doing other venues, like people like Kim Mazel, Jocelyn Brown. They were the kind of first acts we were putting on. But I'd always had in my heart to put on acts that I thought were that hadn't done venues before. And I wanted to try and put on some acts like that. And obviously you've got to remember that this is not now and then. But I remember that the two acts I really want, the two game-changing acts for me, in the sense of changing the atmosphere of GAY, was Sonia and Bucks Fizz. And I'd never known anything like it. So I remember putting Sonia on Valentine's Day back in whatever year it was now. And Danny was a game-changing act as well, but it was in order. I know the first act was Bucks Fizz. And I remember putting them on. I thought, well, they're pure pop. And I thought, why? No gay venue put them on before. And I thought, why? And it just made, like, at the time, they were this huge pop act. And I couldn't understand why no one had put them on. So I put them on. The atmosphere of putting an act like that on was just electric. I'd never known anything like it. And it was a game changer. It was this huge pop party, and I'd never felt anything like it before. And I suddenly realized that that was when I knew that this was the beginning of something special. And I remember, and I'd never heard a crowd chant a name of that, and everybody just, and they said I can't remember what song it was, they all started chanting for Cheryl, go Cheryl, Cheryl. And even the boys were standing there, and Cheryl was just standing there. And at that time, Bucks Fizz was only 3. It had gone down to 3. It was Mike, Bobby, and Cheryl. But Cheryl was obviously a star on TV and things like that. But she was a huge star, and so everybody just loved her. And that was going. And then exactly the same thing happened. I remember it was a very special Valentine's Day because I was involved at the time with Outrage, and I had been asked to do something on the back of a lorry, and Peter Tatchell had arranged to change the name of Old Compton Street to Queer Street. And I remember being on the back of a lorry going down Old Compton Street, renaming it. We had we were playing loud music. Wow. And I remember also being on this platform on a microphone with Peter Tatchell and Derek Jarman. And it was this huge party down Old Compton Street. And then we were doing an after party with Sonia. And again, that atmosphere we had with Bucks Fizz was exactly the same. The place just started chanting Sonia's name, and it was just electric. So I suddenly realized that, again, we had something really, really special. And then about 3 weeks after that, we had, who was it on next? It was, that's right, I was supposed to have Boy George, and he cancelled. And for some reason, I can't remember why, and at the very last minute, the agent that I had booked him through had said, look, I can try and pull a favour. I'll ask Daphne Minogue if she'll do it. And Danny said yes. And that was the first time, obviously, we had Danny on. And that was just the game changer, because I was building a relationship between myself and Danny. Well, mainly between Terry, who managed them. I was building a relationship with him. And that kind of changed things as well, because because obviously then from that we managed to get Kylie. So it was all kind of a journey of a route of where you get to, because obviously people look at GAY now and go, oh my God, you had Kylie, you had Danny, you had, the names you had, the list of people who've done GAY over the years, the Spice Girls, all of those artists. It didn't just happen overnight. It was a gradual thing. To build it, you had to create a trust between you and record labels. And that was very hard because, interesting enough, as much as record labels were run by a lot of gay people, they were not literally the most supportive people of LGBT venues. It was easier to get female performers than it was to get male performers. I remember one time that I nearly got Justin Timberlake to do GAY, nearly. And I remember, the agent at the time kind of stopped it because he said, well, we don't want people thinking that Justin's gay, do we? And that was the kind of attitude then, For a long time, I was convinced that maybe Justin was homophobic. And because obviously I would kind of work out, hang on, why did we nearly have him? Why did we get so far down the route to getting him? And then it didn't happen. I thought, well, it had got to a point where somebody had stopped it from happening. So I kind of thought, but it turned out actually, when you look at, and it's important to say this now because obviously I don't want people to misconstrue that he isn't, because you look at what he's done for support for LGBT rights and things like that. So it wasn't until after I realized it wasn't him that was the problem. It was people who underneath him who were obviously, he probably doesn't even know that this even happened.
But isn't it incredible? Like right now, it's just a given that if a musical act is trying to break, that they will have a specific strategy around how to reach queer audiences. But 20, 30 years ago, it was like, no, maybe we don't want to be...
It's not just a queer audience. I don't think it's just a queer audience, because also you have to remember as well, for a lot of bands, and it's not just a gay audience, but it's also the first time that they get to perform to an adult audience. So, because if you look at like someone like the act, like the boy bands we had, I mean, we did one of the very first gigs ever for Boyzone. And I built up a relationship with Louis Walsh. We've become very good friends. But if you think about it, the Boyzone till then had only performed to teenage girls. So, so for them to perform at GAY would be the first time ever that they performed to an adult audience. So it's not just, it's two types of audience they're going for, but it's crossing over for a teen band to suddenly perform to actual adults.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm obviously going to have to ask you, who was the worst? Like, what was the nightmare act that you had?
The nightmare, I'm not really into kind of slagging people off, because I don't really believe in that. And it's not really my thing. But I mean, the only nightmare night once was for me, but it was probably, again, a bit like of me being uneducated as well, because sometimes, so often before like GAY or, even Heaven now we do it. Sometimes we do gigs before the venues open. And I remember that Gary Newman was doing the Astoria before a gig before the club night opened. So I thought, oh my God, Gary Newman, that'd be really iconic. He's like electronic, he was the start of electronic music. So he's a pioneer. So I thought, good. But Gary Newman had changed. He decided that he was no longer electronic, he was rock. So suddenly he was performing at this gig, and I'm watching, oh my God, he's doing a rock version of Cars. This is going to be a disaster. And, so when he did GAY after, it was a fucking disaster. I booked someone who I booked it under the premise that they were an electronic artist. I wanted to hear Cars, not a rock version of Cars. So yeah, probably that one.
So you were at the Astoria for about 15 years.
I think it was about, I'm trying to think, actually maybe longer. I think it was about 16 years. Confive moved 94, GAY started 93, or is it 90? I think, is it? Yeah. I just remember that, 92. I think we started at 92. Kylie's second Pride would have been I'm going to have to look this up now. Hang on. I got to do it because I can get the facts up. Hang on. Let me just type in Confive with me.
I know. I bet you it's 94. Put my
1994. Yeah. So Kylie, 93 was the year Kylie did her first Pride at GAY. So GAY started 92, about around October 92. We then left the 11 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, so first of all, it stopped in 2008 at the Astoria, and it was because of Crossrail, because the Astoria was going to be knocked down. When did you first hear that this was a possibility?
Well, the rumours of Crossrail had been going for years, and it kind of been going for years and years, and we kind of thought it was never going to happen. And then, of course, the owners of the Astoria sold the venue to the Mean Fiddler Group. So we kind of thought when the Mean Fiddler Group bought it, it was safer. And then the Mean Fiddler Group got bought out by Live Nation. So we thought that was a real security that was a big company buying it. We were safe. But we didn't kind of realize that the real reason that Live Nation had bought out the Mean Fiddler was because they wanted the Reading and Leeds Festival, which was owned by the Mean Fiddler Group. And so they kind of made out that they wanted to protect the Astoria, but they didn't. I wanted to fight the whole way. At one point, I didn't know what we were going to do, but we kind of knew it was going to happen. But, everybody was lying, whether it be the government, whether it be Ken Livingstone, who was the mayor at the time, because we were writing to everybody trying to save the Astoria. And there were also loads of different plans. So that you could look online and see different plans. And there were a couple of plans that actually the Astoria didn't need to be knocked down. So we thought it was going to be safe. So it got to a point where we knew that the Astoria was going to get knocked down. They were running down the venue. It was suddenly not becoming fun to be there anymore, because they were not spending any money on the upkeep. So it was getting harder and harder to work there. And on the year that we left, around April, May, I was done. I was like going, I don't want to stay here anymore. I want to end GAY on a high at the Astoria. And we had already started making moves to buy Heaven. And my plan was about a year earlier from that, we were trying to buy Heaven. And we had set a deal. But again, the owner of Heaven wasn't the easiest person to work with. And he kept on moving the goalposts. So the deal fell through. So we had walked away from it. And it again, this is where luck comes into it. I had decided I was going to leave the Astoria. We're going to lose it anyway. I'm going to end on a high. So I thought, and I'm going to do it on the way I want to do it. So I decided to call it a day. I take the biggest risk of my life. Call it a day. We had GAY bar, GAY late. They were both doing very well. If that's what I was going to be left with, that's what. But we knew we were going to lose the Astoria, and I am not going to leave it on a low. And I thought, okay, so we created the most amazing Pride night. I had Cyndi Lauper booked for 2 weeks after that, and then I created this last night where I had literally 10 artists that had performed at thingy, and I walked away and I did it myself on my terms. I was very angry at the time because there were some people knowing our history. And so some other people set up a gay night that completely failed. But I was really angry with them because the most they could have done it for was 4 months. They were just trying to grab money.
So that was replacing GAY before Astoria was closed.
Yeah. But luckily it failed. And I don't mean that bitterness, but I had decided that I wanted to leave the LGBT history of the Astoria on a high. And these people went in and did a sub-crap night that failed. People didn't go to it. It only lasted a few weeks. It died on its arse. It was over. But to me, it wasn't about somebody else trying to be better than me. It was about, I wanted control of leaving the Astoria on a high, and you tried to bring it down. But it didn't work, and we still left high. And then literally when we left the Astoria, in that same period of time, the Heaven was in serious trouble. The owner of Heaven rang me and said, I'm going to knock £1 million off the price if you can do the deal within 1 month. If we didn't do the deal, Heaven would not be here now. It was going to go bankrupt. And it was the deal with the bank and everything. And we had 1 month to turn it around. We had to put £100,000 deposit on it to guarantee that we could turn the deal around in 1 month.
Wow. Well, again, nothing like the pressure to get you going.
Yeah, so exactly. So literally, and we did the deal, and then obviously the Heaven go. And it's funny because obviously GAY and Heaven were competitors. So there were a lot of people who went to Heaven who hated GAY. So they were slagging me off against social media. Oh, he's going to ruin Heaven. He's going to destroy Heaven. And I'm going, you are such idiots. You don't know that Heaven was about to go bankrupt. If I didn't do this, Heaven would go, whether you hate me or not is immaterial. Heaven was going to go under. It was over.
Yeah.
We saved Heaven.
Yeah. But we're not talking about Heaven, we're talking about Astoria. So that last night, having worked there for over 15 years, knowing that it was going to be the last night, where was your head at that day?
I don't know. I mean, regret all the time. I didn't want to leave. It wasn't a choice. But and creating most. I mean, I remember the week before when we had Cyndi Lauper on. And it was just the most amazing night. She put on the most incredible show, and having Cyndi on, and I was on stage with her. And my head was going, I'm about to lose this. I've got a legend on my stage, like a legend, and it's like I may never have this again. And that but I knew at the end of the point I was going to lose it. So, I could have kept it for a few more months, but it wasn't going the direction I wanted it to go. I felt like, as I said, it was becoming harder and harder to run the venue. It had no heating in the venue whatsoever. So I kind of left during summer, because I knew that the Astoria in winter was hell. So I'm thinking I didn't really want to go through that.
Mm-mm. And then, so the last night there were a number of performances. Then, obviously there would have been a few balloon drops, and then the venue closed. Everyone left. What did that feel like?
Well, what happened was we went on stage at, I think, 4 a.m. All the staff, everybody went on stage, and we literally said we're all going to leave together, and we all walked out together. Oh. And then I realised that I'd left something behind, so I had to go back 20 minutes later. I did this big dramatic walk out with everybody. I said, "Come on, we're all going together." And actually, and then I had to go back and pick something up. I had the staff wages. I hadn't paid it. I forgot to pay everyone, and I had the staff wages in the office. They came met me outside GAY bar. And they said to me, "We haven't been paid." And I went, "I've got no money." I'm like, "Oh my God, I've left your wages." So I had to go back so I did this big dramatic walk out and had to go back and go get everyone's wages so they could get paid.
So one of the other things that I always ask anyone who comes on the show is what kind of canoodling you got up to. And obviously I know you were very professional.
What do you mean by canoodling?
Well, was there ever any romantic or sexual dalliances in GAY? Did you wait till everyone to leave and then make out on the stage?
Oh God, yes. Yes. I mean, we can't lie about any of that. I mean, yeah, but I mean, it's weird because it one of the things you look back on, it's also a little bit scary as well because things were very different then, and what you got up to then, you couldn't get up to now.
What were you doing, hanging from the rafters?
No, but I mean, look, you have to remember, okay, things happen okay, I'll give you a prime example. I'm not going to name drop someone because I think it's not fair on them. It's their story. But there's a certain celebrity at the moment, American celebrity, which I say, who has in this whole cancel culture about there's allegations against them. Now, whether those allegations are true or not, and I don't know. And I don't know this person. Okay, I've never met them, but I know that they were caught in the toilets having sex at Heaven. This is before we owned it, but I know of this story. Now, that person has been now kind of crucified for having sex in toilets of clubs. And one of the managers of Heaven said, "Oh my God, that happened at Heaven as well." But the difference is when that happened at Heaven, those kind of things happen. Men went and had sex in toilets. Look at the whole situation with George Michael in LA. And a lot of it is not necessarily, let's go and have sex in toilet. It was somewhere where maybe you couldn't take somebody home. Maybe it was a different time. So what went on then may not be acceptable now. Unfortunately, cancel culture is allowing you to cancel out. But actually, you have to look at that particular celebrity wasn't out then. So that was their only opportunity probably to have a dalliance with another man, So things did happen. So often yes, you would have an experience in a club with somebody because often you couldn't take somebody home or you couldn't go back to there because maybe they, lived with their family or they lived with a flatmate that didn't know they were gay or wasn't accepted. It was a different time. So as I said earlier in the interview, people would go to LGBT venues because that was the only time they could be gay. Well, that includes sexual experiences, but things were different then. So as I said, what was acceptable then isn't necessarily acceptable now, but doesn't, so yes, things did happen. But I can't pretend they didn't.
But you're
because I would be a liar.
You're sidestepping my question somewhat though.
Okay. All right. Okay. What's the question?
Did you get up to anything?
Yes. But I'm going back to that story to go. I said, yes, yeah, I did. Because, you would meet guys and things would happen, there would be times where somebody would say, "Have you not got an office?" And they go, "Well, I don't have an office, but I know somewhere we can go. And you would. Opportunities would happen, So, yeah, you can't lie and say it didn't.
Oh, that's all I'm getting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you want to be a bit, but I'm telling you, it happened. What else? You're not. Ask something else.
Well,
ask me.
Are there any particular?
I'm quite honest about.
Are there any particular memories that stick out?
No, I'm trying to think. No, not really. No, I'm trying to. I mean, I'm sure there would be if I really thought about it, but not really. I would always prefer someone to come home with me. I always prefer that. I mean, I've never really been the kind of person that wants to have sex and then even if it's a one night stand, I prefer to wake up with someone in the morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But then you have to have breakfast with them and everything. Well,
I don't eat breakfast. I've lived with an eating disorder all my life. So I've kind of I don't really kind of eat breakfast. But no, I kind of like that. I mean, I kind of live in this Disney world where I always hope that a one night stand would lead to more. Even if it's just a one night stand, there's the hope it would. So if you wake up with them, you get to find out whether you want to see them again or not. I kind of that's just the person I am. I mean, I suppose it's trying to fantasize that something's not a one night stand when actually it is.
Yeah, like prolonging it. But what ratio of one night stands ended up being on a second 2 night stands?
I can't remember that. I can't answer that question. But I can answer the question that most times it was them that didn't want to see me again.
Aww,
I mean,
why?
Yeah. So I don't know. You'll have to ask them that. That's the question. Why did, I can go on one of those dating shows. Why did you not want it to be a second date? Maybe I was crap in bed. I don't know. I mean, I did have there was a period of the Astoria where I had a long-term relationship. I also had issues with my body, which I still have, to do with having an eating disorder. So that affected things as well.
Yes, that's a bit difficult, isn't it? Especially when the scene is so... it's diversifying now, but at the time was so body focused.
It was very body oriented. I also did some really bad things at the time to stop me from eating. And those kind of things also created mood swings, taking diet pills and things like that which create mood swings. So, and that kind of changes who you are as well. So, creating mood swings probably maybe not the easiest person to be around.
Ah, interesting. And you're not doing those now, I hope.
Not doing it now. I mean, but I still live with the eating disorder. It's a matter of learning how to deal with it. I use running now, but it's an obsession with running and marathon training and things like that to deal with the eating and body issues. But I have done some really bad things to me, which I'm open about because I hope because I don't think enough men talk about eating disorders. But when you do things, you don't necessarily realize the other damage that you could be doing to yourself. When diet pills, for example, do create damage on other things. Obviously, it stops you from getting proper night's sleep. It creates mood swings. It was really weird how I could lose it over something really tiny, but actually not over something major.
It is this really interesting thing how addictive exercising can become and how you can become really singularly focused on I think, to do this miles.
I mean, it's slightly different for me. So so the problem is that often people want to put labels on things and when you put labels on things, it becomes harder to deal with. But I wouldn't say I've had bulimia. And I definitely haven't had, what's the other one? I've forgotten. My mind's gone blank.
Anorexia.
I don't know whether I have had a form, because it's, when you look at the terms, they're very specific. I mean, definitely not bulimia because I've never tried to, I have tried to stick my fingers down my throat, but I'm not very good at throwing up. So it doesn't kind of work. I've tried more laxative because it's easier. But when you do things like have eating disorders, so I can't have food in the house. So if I can't do a weekly shop, if I did a weekly shop, I would eat it all in one. It would be gone in one go. so I can't even have it in. I just can't even have food in the house. Otherwise, it will be gone. I mean, I've woken up with a cornetto wrapper on my shoulder, and I've eaten it in my sleep, and it was in the fridge, the freezer. It's like I can't throw food in the bin because I would get up in the night and take it out of the bin. I've been known to throw food out of the window onto the street because that way I won't eat it. I buy food as I eat it rather than thinking. But then I also worry about putting on weight. So what I do is if friends say, "Do you want to go out for dinner?" Very mostly I'd go out for dinner with a friend on a Tuesday night because I don't worry about what I eat on a Tuesday because my marathon training and my longest run of the week is always on a Wednesday morning. I put Wednesday mornings around for marathon training, and it's an average of 13, 14 miles every Wednesday. So psychologically in my head, I can eat what I like on a Tuesday night because I'll burn it off on a Wednesday. So so I kind of use running as when I'm going to also eat as well.
And it's this very kind of controlled way of thinking about things, isn't it? Like if I do this here, then this will be fine here, and this will be this here. I was running like quite a lot for a while, like doing like half marathons 3 times a week, just because it was like, this is going to help me not think about things that I'm thinking about. And it's just going to...
But actually, sometimes running helps me think about things. So sometimes like running, when I go for a run, sometimes if I'm on my own, it gives me ideas. Yeah. So I can go for a run and suddenly go, oh my God, this is what we can do. And some of my ideas for club nights and things like that have come from running because you're coming up with ideas. Sometimes running is a good time you can use it to think about things. But sometimes also running can be very difficult because sometimes you can go for a run and you're on your own. And if something negative's happening, and sometimes if something bad's happening in my life and I'm going for a run, actually it can stop my run because I suddenly just go, I can't be bothered with this.
Oh, really?
You know? Yeah. And then the problem is then, but if I fail a run, I go, well, hang on, I ate last night. So I've only done like 2 miles. I've only burned 200 calories. Well, oh my God. And so then it creates another worry.
Yes. Yeah. This like anxiety upon anxiety. Yeah. Do you have conversations with people in your head whilst you're running?
Well, that's a difficult question. I talk to myself while running. Don't necessarily think they're conversations with other people.
So you don't like, because I think that's what I do a lot is like rerun conversations or like plan for conversations. Different,
but that's not having a conversation. Yeah.
But I like rerun it and then rewrite it as well. Like,
I mean, sometimes I do things like that, and and sometimes I do. You kind of talk out loud to yourself, and which I do, and people look at you weirdly. I remember, but then I suddenly do that when I'm walking the dog. And I'll be walking the dog and I'm talking out loud and someone looks at you strangely and then I pretend I'm talking to the dog. Go, oh yes, good boy. But I haven't. And I used to wear headphones and sometimes listen to music, which I don't really do because I actually prefer to know my surroundings when I'm running. But I do remember once listening to Dolly Parton 95 running down Oxford Street and not realizing how loud I was singing along, because obviously with headphones you don't realize how loud you're being. And someone said to me, by the way, next time you run down Oxford Street, try singing Dolly Parton in tune. I went, what? I heard you. I went, oh my God.
Well, I mean, it couldn't have been that far out of tune if they knew what the song was. I mean,
I think everybody recognizes the lyrics of 9 to 5. If you don't, then you're not a friend of mine.
Oh no, I know the chorus. I don't know the verse.
Well, I think probably the chorus is mainly, yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking, oh no, I'm going to be blacklisted by you. Do you have any memories of the Astoria or your own queer scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, please get in touch. I want to create the biggest online record of people's memories and stories from the queer scene. Go to lostspacesPodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space and tell me what you got up to. Bonus points are always given for embarrassing photos, so I encourage you to share those. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as Lost Spaces Pod. And for more on Jeremy, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Jeremy Joseph. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I have been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, which is called Well Groomed Boys and is playing underneath my talking right now, on all good streaming platforms. If you liked this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told someone or some people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.